sun, and space for gardens. Those were tops on Susan Snyder and Mark Hathaway's list when they went house hunting in 2014 after years of renting.
We wanted to come in and have a blank slate to create gardens, and sometimes when you're looking for houses, there's already a lot of landscaping that has been put in place. So when we found this, we were so excited.
The first straight bed that we put in was cinder blocks, and we decided to inset it in the ground because the previous square foot gardens we had, the water would run off. If we could put them sunk in cinder blocks, then we could water and not have runoff. And then we could use the side holes to plant plants. So I bought a bunch of cinder blocks, and in July I thought it'd be a great idea to start digging. I was so defeated after 6 cinder blocks. It was very gratifying to finally get it in. But it was a lot of work at first. We actually had someone help us and install cedar fence posts into the ground and concrete. And then we had a cattle panel put on that.
Its airy frame harbors seasonal climbing crops like peas, beans, cucumbers, and even morning glories. While renting, Susan had learned the basics at a community center vegetable gardening class.
I went home and we had our little 4x4 square foot garden that we built. So it's just kind of literally blossomed from there, you know, just learning as we go.
We're both from the Northeast, and so there's one season, only one season. And my parents had a garden growing up, my grandparents had a garden growing up. I send pictures to my relatives up north and they're jealous in the snow and the mud.
To round out the garden, they arranged limestone beds with a centerpiece of flowers and water for wildlife. They chose limestone, like the cinder blocks, for long-lasting durability.
And then we played around with different designs for the limestone beds to see what would work, and we wanted to be able to walk around and, you know, make it easy to plant things and reach across the bed.
The design allows them to circulate crops every year. Pine straw mulch protects plants from splashing soil, but doesn't clump and allows rainfall to easily meet the soil. This year, statuesque onions frame the outer borders.
We just mostly have Texas sweet white onions, and I have 75 in the ground, and these go in the ground really before the first of the year. They're usually in by the end of December or first week of January. And then we're usually able to harvest them by mid-May. And so when we harvest them, you know, we'll keep some out on the counter to use, but then we usually chop the rest up and freeze them, and we have them pretty much all year. And we do the same thing with the tomatoes, because we have 13 tomato plants in the ground.
My grandmother, Depression era, taught me how to, you cut the tomatoes in half and you put them on wax paper in the freezer on like a cookie sheet. And then when they freeze, you pull them out and put them in Ziploc bags, and you just keep freezing them and putting them in there. So we end up with all these huge Ziploc bags full of frozen tomatoes, so then you can take those out whenever you want them. My grandmother, Rosemary Bernardi Hathaway, she had a garden in Massachusetts where we grew up. And the story that, it was always something that was amazing, that there was cucumber salads, and the cookouts at her house in the summer were spectacular. And the stories that I hear is my great-grandfather, who was from Italy, he would come out for the summer and he would go through that garden, and even at the end of the season, he could pluck things out of there and make minestrone soup or anything out of it. I got really into pickling about 10 years ago, and she sent me all of her handwritten notes.
They renovated an existing bed that had been edged with composite landscape timbers.
We spent a couple days just clearing out the whole bed. It was pretty overgrown, and so over the past few years we decided to turn it into a rose bed. We've got Belinda's Dream and Cecile Brunner and Grandma's Yellow and just a bunch of miniature roses.
There was originally a lattice screen with the roses that we had there that was attached to the fence, but we know it's our neighbor's fence, and so we figured if they have to replace that fence, they're gonna have to tear the whole thing down. I built it out of cedar lattice so it wouldn't rot, and then I framed it with cedar fence pickets, and I kind of sandwiched them. What I did was I took 8-foot rebar and I just drove it into the ground so that it's standing on the rebar. It kind of is sandwiched sitting over the rebar. I did attach a couple little pickets to the fence to hold it in place, but if the neighbor ever replaces the fence, I'll just be able to cut it free.
Young evergreen star jasmine and crossvine, along with summertime passion vine, have plans to fill the frame. The first year, they thought they'd nailed this garden thing, but it was spring 2015 with historic rainfall.
And so we thought, oh my gosh, we just have the magic touch. And then we realized the following year when we were in drought, and it wasn't so easy, but I think that first year really is kind of what hooked us. Since then we've learned, you know, Texas can be a tough place at times to garden.
So that's for us, is getting a large rain tank and really trying to use as much rainwater as possible. The one in the backyard here is 1,500 gallons. And then we have a 90 gallon in the front and a 65 gallon in the back.
But they don't use their reserves on the lawn.
Every February, get a couple truckloads of compost, spread it out, and then let it fend for itself.
I'm shocked at how much compost makes a difference.
I used to do the compost pile more out in the open, and we realized we had this special little spot hidden behind the bushes back in the corner. So we have named it Compost Corner, and back there we can hide neighbors' leaves off the street and all the bags of leaves. Nothing goes in the trash, and none of our scraps, none of anything. So it's nice because we can have two piles, one resting, one working, and plenty of room to flip it. The pond was a project that had a good start, and I couldn't figure out how to finish it.
The heavy clay meant backbreaking work, but they wanted National Wildlife Federation certified backyard habitat status, which requires a water source.
Could have done it a little bigger now in retrospect, but I really like it. It's a sound and just building up so to look like a spring coming out of the bamboo there.
Nearby, they defined a patio with flagstones and a cinder block wall topped with container plants. For a distinctive table, Susan created a mosaic top with discarded tiles. She repurposed its base from a rotted-out fire pit.
There's actually another mosaic table back there that I made. I found that table at Goodwill, and it's all sort of wrought iron, and I found this glass plate at a thrift store for $4. It's fun to do that stuff when you can be creative with secondhand things.
That little bench, 20 plus years ago, my next door neighbor, he was a stonemason, and he was helping build the Bob Bullock Texas State History Museum. And so they let all the workers take home the little scraps of stone from the facade. And so finally, oh, there you go. Let's make a little bench out of it.
They turned a back corner into an outdoor kitchen with project workspace and storage. To give this new room a colorful wall, they turned once again to cinder blocks, colorized with liquid iron sulfate and a paintbrush.
Keep in mind, though, is you don't want to do it over any concrete driveway or anything like that you don't want to turn orange.
Since most of the garden's in sun, here's where they can stage colorful shade lovers in containers. They jazzed up the screened-in porch as another living room, including for their cats.
We want to bring wildlife into this yard, and we have a lot of different songbirds, and we have all kinds of lizards and toads and just all kinds of wildlife. So we don't want them out here, interfering with all of that. Well, the porch was here when we moved in, but it wasn't really used very much. So it had been painted sort of a very dark olive green. I actually grew up on a street in upstate New York called Morningside, and our house was this color, and it was my mom's favorite color, and so we looked for the same shade of yellow. So we had taken a course with a guy named Dan Phillips at the Phoenix Commotion several years ago out in Huntsville, and he's amazing, and he's doing all of this incredible work with building houses for low-income people using pretty much all recycled materials. And so we had learned mosaic making from him.
From around town, they collected discarded and demo tile. Over several learning curve weekends, they designed a tree that unites their growing philosophy indoors and out.
Austin is such an amazing place to garden because there are so many knowledgeable people and experts who are willing to share their inspiration and their knowledge. So we've just learned by talking to lots of people and experimenting and seeing what works and trying new stuff next year.